then the light bulb sort of went off and started thinking about, I should do this full time because at this point now I have a special needs child. And I'm thinking I'm going to need to take care of him for his whole life, even beyond my life. So I need to build a legacy, need to build legacy well.
This is the Yield Coach Show, episode 48. Hey everybody, this is your coach Ian Brown. A few announcements. Yield Coach Capital has opened its doors to investors looking to multiply their money while working with yours truly and our varsity investment team. We recently closed our 170-acre Gainesville, Florida industrial tract, and our limited partner investors are on pace to make 2.5 times or more on their money. That opportunity is gone, but don't miss the next one. Be sure to join our investor list and never miss a deal again. You can join our investor list by the portal, which is in the show notes of this podcast. It's in our Instagram bio link, and you can also do it at yield-coach.com. If you join our investor list, we will get you the free gift, 107 questions to ask a deal sponsor, and a discount to our Employee to Entrepreneur video course, which is packed full of information and case studies to kickstart your investment success. Now is your time to take the field. I'm your host, Ian Brown. Every episode, we bring you dynamic entrepreneurs, real estate investors, thought leaders, and inspirational guests ready to open up and share their story, the good, the bad, the ugly, so you can learn lessons, gain advantages, and accelerate your own success. Very excited today to be joined by Miss Maria Zondervan. I'm trying, Maria. Maria is an exciting guest. She's the founder and CEO of Blue Vikings Capital. She has been investing in real estate since the 90s. And she's tackled everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes and hotels, very diverse background. She likes affordable and workforce housing as safe spots for investors. And we're going to learn about what she's been doing with the autistic community to help. So, Maria, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Interesting bio. We'll unpack that a little bit. But if you would, give us just a little bit of background on yourself.
Yeah, I started in real estate back when I was in college, which, as you mentioned, was about 5 years ago. All right. So 1990s there. University of Florida, Gator. And as I was studying for finals one year, I started an infomercial about real estate where they made it seem really, really simple. So, I bought one of those courses and spent my textbook money on that instead. And just kind of had that as my sideline gig, as I had another profession. I was a wildlife biologist for 26 years. But real estate is awesome because it can be passive if you do it right. And so I kind of did that on the side because as a biologist, believe it or not, you don't make a lot of money.
What?
But it's something you can have a lot of fun with and be passionate about and do cool stuff. But it's also nice to have that nest egg.
Mm-hmm. See, like how, the courses, I feel like, so I didn't really, when I was at Florida State, so go Noles. It's okay. We'll have some fun. We're all Florida here. We're all Florida here. So, but so much of the coursework is just not on topic. And this is we're not going to hold podcast on this, but you're in undergrad or whatever program, and you just don't care about so much of the topics. And, I really like playing rugby and bartending and I was a history major. I loved my history classes. I had no interest in going to Spanish class, the bare minimum math class that I had to take to be a history major. There were some classes where I did the math on how many I could miss, and I went to the rest and I went along. But I can see why you might sit there, watch an infomercial, be drawn to it, and be like, I want to get into real estate. And I remember wanting to get into real estate starting in about that time frame, undergrad, because I was paying my own rent. So it's quite simply, I was paying my own bills.
Yep.
And you're like, okay. So I would go bartend or wait tables or whatever I was doing, literally have cash in hand, because especially 90s, early 2000s, you had a lot of cash transactions. I just go pay my landlord with that hard-earned cash. And I was like, man. And even not knowing like financial underwriting, like I know it now, I would just kind of do the basics. I would like just search like what a mortgage would cost for a price of house that I was in. I was like, oh my God, this guy's making hundreds of dollars on me every month. And I was like, I can definitely do this. And it was kind of the first light bulb where I was like, I want to get into real estate investing. Very simple, but that's the first thing I saw. So what was the course that you saw? What did you buy?
It was Carlton Sheets. He was the guru of the time, and he was pushing the whole lease option, no money down deal transaction, wraparound mortgages, all that kind of stuff. It was all very new at the time. Very few people had learned it, but we did our first one as a lease option that we house hacked. And house hacking was not a term that anybody used back then. But like you said, we were shelling out all this money for rent, and then we're like, huh, so we can get into this house, no money down, and then rent out part of it to pay for most of it. I'm like, that sounds better. Let's do that.
Yeah. I don't think we've ever talked about a residential. I've done lease options personally, and I've helped some clients do them. They're awesome. We did one on a hotel. The audience would consider it a motel, maybe not one that you would stay at, but I mean, it was perfect. We had seller financing, and I know what the guy was doing. And you know what? He might have been a Carlton Sheets guy from back in the day, but he didn't have his down payment yet. So by jumping in with a lease and just pocketing the net cash flow, and he went ahead and lived on site in this, it was like an 88 room hotel. And I think he got his down payment scrolled away in like a year. I mean, he was living modestly, but people don't think, I'm not saying that's the sexiest approach to real estate, but talk about like scrubbing your way in. I mean, that's an interesting way to go. And then your example being residential, you could do the same thing applies. You get in, and by house hacking, now you're actually making money, assuming there's like an arbitrage or a delta on the rent and the lease payment, that you're paying, and then boom, pull the option trigger. And what I like about lease options too is you can change the value of the property while you have it. So if you negotiate it well, the landlord's really thinking like, is this joker even going to exercise the option? Well, I'll speak for myself. They look at me like, is this guy even going to be able to buy it? So I feel like they don't dwell on the option price nearly as much as they would if it was a purchase and sale agreement. They're like, okay, let's focus on the lease and what are you going to pay me every month? And are you credit worthy? And sure, yeah, we'll do an option price at X. I just feel like it gets almost, I won't say swept under the rug, but less attention. And then boom, you get in there, you start cleaning up the property and painting and pressure washing and putting a tenant in there if you're going to house hack it. And the next thing you know, property's worth more and you've pocketed cash, and now you can afford a property that's worth more than you negotiated it. So it's a great approach.
We both bought and sold on lease options, and if you find a tired landlord, they're kind of the perfect potential for getting in on lease option, because you say, hey, because I'm planning on buying it, I will handle all repairs, right? I mean, so many tired tenants, they're like, whoa, tenant that's going to handle the repairs. I'm like, anything under, pick your number, $500, $200, whatever. Any small stuff, I'm not going to bother you. I'm going to take care of all that because it's going to be my home. I'm going to buy this. You get them in that mindset, and they're like, oh, okay, this could work. And they're still thinking you may not exercise, right? But we would also sell it that way. Say, look, we're selling to you. You're going to handle the repairs. And you're right, a lot of them don't end up executing on it. But while they have your house, because they have that owner mindset, they don't tear up your place, and they make improvements and they take care of it. So you just get a much better tenant. You can charge more rent because, you're putting more money towards their down payment, which they may or may not end up using. It's really a win-win situation on both ends.
And I guess more of an audience point, but one thing to consider if you're going to enter into a lease option, if you can, you may get credit towards the purchase price for your rent payments. It's a negotiated item. Some landlords aren't going to go for that, but we've done it, done it for others. So that's just another practical pointer there.
What we offered up to our tenants, if they said they wanted some of that, it was like, well, the rent payment is the rent payment, but if you want to put extra towards it, that will go towards it, and we'll credit it at 125%. So if you want to pay an extra $100 above your rent, we'll give you $125 for that. Credit towards the house. So sort of like an instant savings, kind of like when your employer matches your 401k kind of thing up to a certain percentage.
Well, and obviously, you're cheering for them, and like you want them to, it's all structured where they can rent and then buy. And if they don't, they've at least treated the property much, much better. I think that was a good point. I hadn't necessarily thought about that when you were talking through it, but you're going to treat the property much differently than if you're just a tenant. So, so you're a Carlton Sheets graduate guru. Where did you what'd you say? Did you say you're a biologist?
Wildlife biologist. Yeah.
Wildlife.
Now, endangered species.
I don't even know if I want to step into that topic. So the bugs and bunnies reports, right? So it's like the one that make all the investors cringe.
Well, no, not really that part of it, but I worked for St. Johns River Water Management District, so they just own a lot of land. They own like 700,000 acres of land, and we took care of the endangered species on those properties and did what we could to increase their populations.
you guys are rare. There's not a lot of like science ecologists, biologists, environmental types like turned investor.
Well, I think that's why my investment strategy might be a little different than some, because I still have that passion behind everything I do. It just has to be passion driven. So
yeah, it's not just the almighty dollar, right? You got to have something
no.
behind it. Well, I think that's a good segue. I'm glad you said that. So, where did you go from? You graduated from Carleton, you got the T-shirt and the plaque, and then where did you go after that?
Yeah, so bought more residential, more houses, was doing everything on my own. Didn't know real estate could be a team sport. Like that was not a thing I knew anything about. So just out there doing it kind of on my own. At some point, I guess it was leading up to the big crash in 2008, but we were approaching that bubble. I said, man, I don't know that these houses can get much higher. So we sold some of those. I say we because my husband was part of the equation here. He was a school teacher at the time. He was teaching some special needs and students, all that. Again, very passionate about those things, but not making a lot of money. Wanted to open his own business. I'm like, let's cash out some real estate and get into the franchise world, entrepreneur stuff. So did that, bought built from the ground up a Massage MB franchise. This was when they're brand new. Most people hadn't heard of them. Now they're kind of all over the place. That ended up doing really, really well. Ended up buying a second location. And then eventually, those are producing more cash flow. And we're still trying to keep our living expenses down, living within our means. And so now we need a place to put that cash flow. I was like, well, time to buy more real estate, write off some of that income. But we realized we just can't scale fast enough, and collecting single family homes, it becomes work after a while if you're managing all those on your own. So that's when we
Mm-hmm.
decided to jump into multifamily. So I started studying everything there was to know about multifamily and jumped into that in 2019. And yeah, so kind of went multifamily from there. And once I figured out how well that works and how much more profitable it is, and kicking myself for not going there much, much sooner, and that you could be completely passive. You could just be a limited partner and stuff. And I was still making more money on those transactions than I was with my single family homes, better returns on my investment. Then the light bulb sort of went off and started thinking about, I should do this full time because at this point now I have a special needs child. And I'm thinking I'm going to need to take care of him for his whole life, even beyond my life. So I need to build a legacy, need to build legacy wealth, and started getting to know a lot of parents in that sector in the special needs world, and started seeing their struggles. I'm like, I can help them too. This really can be a team sport. So yeah, kind of just kept going from there.
And I do want to, obviously, we're going to jump into that special needs component. When we talk about going from single family to multifamily, that is a popular topic and it's a common question. And almost everybody universally says what you just said a moment ago. Why didn't I do it earlier? And I think just maybe a couple minutes before that, you talked about team sport. These are like resounding themes in my life, I think, for this audience. And when you do single family, unless you're doing like maybe fix and flips at scale, a larger rental portfolio, again, more at scale, it's not really a team sport. It's usually like one frantic investor that sometimes doesn't even know if they're making money. And you might think that sounds silly, but you're constantly churning cash into new deal, new deal, new deal. It takes time to slow down for a half day and tighten up your QuickBooks and work with your accountant and figure out what you actually netted and what's my tax consequence. And I have met, and I did 7 years of title and escrow. I did so many closings for fix and flippers where they would tell me, they're like, I'm not even sure. I think I made money. They're like, I still got to reconcile the books on this one. Some of them were also brokers or agents. So they're like, they got their commission in the deal, but like, you don't want to be flipping houses for a sales commission. So anyways, we'll pause there. But the point is, going to scale and going to multifamily, assuming it's large enough, it doesn't have to even be that big. The first one I bought that was a little bit larger, was 28 units. And okay, that can support maybe not a full-time on-site, but we actually did have a gentleman that lived in a discounted unit and worked like 20 hours a week, at a modest rate because he had deeply discounted housing. It was perfect. And it was like he felt like it was his community, and we self-managed it, but it wasn't so burdensome. But you can't really do that on a one-off house. So I think that the team sport component is amazing. Now you can afford, like the building will heal itself. Like if something breaks, unless it's horrible and not forecasted, which might be an insurance claim. If it's just a routine thing that's like, oh man, that's like $10,000, $20,000, you can probably just like stop distributions, let the property heal itself, build up your account, and do it right out of cash flow. That is really not the case with a house. I mean, if you have like a roof fail on a single family, unless you just saved or escrowed the money, I mean, or have a line of credit, you don't have it. So you just, and it would take too long for the single family home to do that on its own. So,
As I'm sure you know, being in Florida, our insurance is went kind of crazy here. And insurance companies started requiring you put a new roof on a house to stay insured, regardless of whether the roof needed to be replaced. So I ended up having to replace 3 perfectly good roofs all in the same year on single family homes. And that killed the cash flow for 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. And yeah, you just don't get that in multifamily, like you said. Plus, of course, the tax benefits with all your bonus depreciation, accelerated depreciation. Can't get that with single family. And in the end, it's not what you make, it's what you keep, right? And so,
exactly,
like you said, sometimes you don't have time to take a breath and even figure out what you're making. Well, you need to calculate in the taxes.
Yes.
And, especially if you're flipping, oh my gosh, you're paying so much taxes. That's ordinary income tax.
Oh, I know, it's brutal. And when I was debating a few years back about like how I was going to switch, when I say switch from like, I was, the Kiyosaki quadrants, I was an S, self-employed. And I was like, I want to jump over. I really want to just go to an I. I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. And I had a portfolio and it was covering my expenses. So I'm like, okay, like I'm Kiyosaki definition wealthy. Friends wouldn't consider me rich, but I could do this forever and not work traditionally. And I was like, well, and I was like kind of hesitant to stop the title and escrow and some of the niche brokerage. I still do some commercial brokerage, but I was like, man. And then I started to think about, okay, how much tax I'm paying on this earned income that I'm like hanging on to like this rope. And I was like, it's not even as good as I think it is because of the tax rate I'm getting clipped at. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep channeling my energy into these assets that have a very low tax burden. And for really up until about the time of this recording, I mean, we're in Florida. We're in one of the states that I think Miami just, at least single family, just posted like a double-digit year-over-year appreciation as of last month.
Crazy.
I know there's places where people are listening, where there's 15% declines, and things like that. But we're in a good state, Maria, and all my real estate holdings have been very good to me, so I don't have any regrets letting go of that title and escrow earned W-2 income to do more of what you're talking about with the tax benefits.
Yeah, when we took a look at it, and again, this is about really looking at what you're making. So when I leave my W-2 job, right, I can now claim a real estate professional status. So now I can start writing off my husband's active income. And when we looked at what that was, because he's taking dividends from our Massage Envy locations and all that, plus we have all the real estate coming in, it more than made up for almost my entire income. So I'm like, I'm working for free, I'm busting my butt over here. And if I simply just left the job, the tax savings almost made up for that whole income.
That's amazing. And you can now follow a passionate path.
There you go.
Which I think that's a good segue. So if we could jump into, some of the passion that you bring to what you're doing and the purpose. I know they're correlated, but investing with a cause. I know more than the audience knows right now, but I'm going to let you pick it up from there. Tell us how you do that.
Yeah, well, they say if you're going to do well in this world, you got to have a big why, right? And there are no bigger whys in this world than your kids. And so my oldest son, I've got 2 sons. His name is Carl. He's now 22, but he's got autism, and that comes with some limitations. Now he's pretty high functioning. I'm super proud of him. At one point, they said, he'll never graduate high school with a regular diploma. Not only did he do that and do very well, but he just got his AA degree, and he's going for his history major at University of Central Florida. So
Awesome.
another history major out there,
Yeah,
up in real estate, right? Who knows?
exactly.
Who knows the path they'll pick? But anyway, he's doing great. But nonetheless, there are limitations. He has a very hard time finding a job, just because the social skills are lacking, right? That's the biggest hindrance. And 1 in 44 kids in the United States right now is born with autism. That's just a huge, staggering number. I mean, really think about that. 1 in 44. You can't reach out your arms in the grocery store, not hit somebody who's affected by autism. So these individuals, they really long to be independent and live on their own, but they're gullible. People take advantage of them. They don't read social clues very well. There's some limitations there that make that very difficult. So 75% of them live with their parents forever. And the fact is, if all goes according to plan, right, you're going to outlive your parents. And then what? What happens next? So parents really worry about who's going to take care of my kids when I'm not here. And a lot of them, they're going to age too. It might be difficult. And some just get worn out taking care of kids your entire life, right? Even if they're adult kids, it's exhausting. So we want to provide a place where they can live independently, but with some assistance. Someone is still looking after them. The parents can rest easy knowing there's still eyes on them. Someone's going to make sure everything's okay and provide some of those services that they need. For
Mm-hmm.
example, a lot of them don't drive. Only about 50% of the population drives, right? So you need transportation. You need some social skills training. You need job coaching, job placement services. So integrate communities that offer all of that. So for that purpose, I set up Valhalla Villas, which is a nonprofit where that is exactly what we're aiming to do.
That's awesome. So in the Vikings brand too, right? I'm gonna say it
Yeah,
wrong. Valhalla, right?
Valhalla, right? Yeah,
Yes.
Blue Vikings Capital, and that's all of that comes from the fact that I was born and raised in Sweden, actually. So I'm an immigrant from Sweden. I've got that Swedish Viking blood running through my veins.
Nice. And then for those that are watching video or YouTube, you've got the Vikings Capital, Blue Vikings Capital logo with the Viking helmet, and you've definitely got the look too. I could just put that right on your head.
Thank you. Sure,
So
wearing a helmet. Yeah,
the
you got
um
one around here somewhere.
you got one. I would imagine you would. So now you run this as I believe you told me before the show you run it as a nonprofit or a foundation. Can you
Yeah,
elaborate?
that's a nonprofit. Valhalla Villas is, and so there's going to be two kind of models. There's a ground up development model where we make community exclusively for people with autism, for those that kind of need or want to be in a community that has just caters to their needs. But then to get things, that takes a long time to build those ground up, and we do that through tax credits that the nonprofit can get from the government, basically, where they give us tax credits that we then sell to a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a big corporation, let's say Microsoft or something, you have a big tax burden, we can sell you dollar tax credits for 90 cents, right? So you save 10 cents on the dollar to reduce your taxes. And then we take that money to build the community from the ground up. So it's really cool, but it takes a long time. It takes about 6 years per community to get those off the ground. And like I mentioned, there's a tremendous, tremendous need for this. So to do it faster, we're taking the real estate syndication model because that's something I'm already doing. I'm already syndicating. I know how to pick out apartment complexes that are doing well. And so we find the ones that are kind of right in the right spot, close to the grocery store, walking distance. And, a lot of people don't drive, good employers around there that we can form communities with. And then we go buy an apartment complex, just like you would any other apartment complex. And then you integrate autism into that complex. So you have all your regular tenants, everyone's paying market rents just as usual. And then your autistic individuals can come in there, live. We do roommate matching services, so they don't have the cost of a full apartment necessarily. Have the social integration, which is good for them. A lot of them suffer from loneliness. You're sort of a built-in friend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, more eyes on somebody, and then we put the services in place, and then the nonprofit comes in and can provide grants and scholarships to anyone who still has problems meeting that affordability criteria.
I'm just thinking through what you say because it's so novel and unique. So high level, like from the real estate side, the asset is the asset. It's not necessarily a special apartment at
That's right.
acquisition, other than maybe the location, like walkability and scores like that. You said only 50% of the, was it the autistic population drive? So only
That's
about
right.
half. Okay. So you're kind
Yeah.
of accommodating for that by location. Um, hmm. Is there, and maybe you already said it. So you'll do the roommate matching. Not, forgive me for the naivete. You have the alternative avenues for getting the rent paid. Are there any extra challenges with having um or a heavily autistic tenant base and just funding the rent? Does it typically need to come from the tenant or a parent or a foundation? What does it normally look like? What would an investor, I guess would be my question. What would an
Right.
investor expect for some headwinds or challenges with this setup?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, the investors that invest in these complexes, they're getting the same thing as they would if it was a regular tenant, right? It's market rents. We're working behind the scenes to make them be able to afford that by whatever means necessary.
Okay.
Some of them will get Social Security disability, and so they'll have those disability checks that they can apply to rent. Some get housing assistance. Some have parents contributing. Some have jobs that can contribute. They may have ABLE accounts, guardianships. There's a whole line of structures, you know.
Hmm.
So there's certainly different ways that they might be funding it, but it's not gonna be anything that an investor realizes. The real estate and the services are kind of two separate pieces. So what makes it very different in the syndication model is most syndications, they exit in 5 to 7 years, thereabouts. Obviously, that time frame can change. This would not have an exit. You're going to have a refinance where you get all your capital back, but you're going to have cash flow forever with this property unless you choose to sell your share. So, it's something that can really benefit people that want to leave something for their kids. We know that 70% of wealth is lost by the second generation because those that didn't make it usually don't know how to take care of it or how to reinvest it. So, if you leave something to a child, but they don't know how to get back into the next great limited partnership or whatever way you are choosing to invest, they may not know how to do that. So they may squander that money. In this case, they can't, right? They're not in charge of when it sells. So they're just going to get that monthly cash flow forever. And you can just set them up and make sure they're always going to have that money.
I like that.
And
Do you
it's really
have
great for special needs parents who have kids that they need to think about long term, setting them up.
um would it be common to have a limited partner investor be one of the parents of a autistic tenant?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they're invested in the community, and like you said, the security, like you mentioned, your child, hopefully, God willing, outliving you, you have some built-in cash flow and wealth to pay for the services, and you know where they are because they're in this community.
That's right.
You've really married some interesting things together, Maria.
That's the plan. That's the plan.
Wow, big brain. I like it.
Just trying to solve problems. It's all about solving problems.
Well, and I think that's a common theme with, the entrepreneurial community, but you've done it in such a, like, it's just, I don't know anyone else doing what you're doing. It's a very cool, very unique, passion filled approach. Um, uh, do you see a with the tax, I was thinking about the tax credit stuff. So like you don't get, and I'm verbally familiar with the tax credit process. My younger brother used to work for a tax credit group, and that's all they did. And I used to appraise some tax credit apartments, but it's been a while. So there's nothing that would stop you in the tax credit new construction world, like marrying it up with your kind of autistic platform. Because I guess they're just standard tenants with income qualification. Am I wrong on
Yeah,
that?
so this is it's through Florida housing the affordable housing plans.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually have requests for proposals are specific for special needs. So it's actually geared towards that.
Okay.
So it's all part of what they want to see. They want us to create affordable housing for people with special needs, and then they give us the tax credit specifically for that. So only nonprofits can apply for those things, and yeah, it's tailored for that. So that's not something we invented.
Yeah, I had a group. They didn't come on the show. They're just former, I'd say, colleagues slash kind of clients. They were doing a veterans, or like HUD Vash. Are you familiar? So it's Housing Urban Development Veterans Association. Some people call it HUD-VASH. And, but you had to, at least what they were doing, you had to be a nonprofit to qualify. It might have just been for the funding. I'm not sure if they were pulling tax credits or not, but the funding was tremendous. Like 90% LTV or better with, some room for CapEx, I think. So it was
Yeah,
like,
that's about where this falls as well.
okay. So like kind of unparalleled in like the traditional market for financing. So, and it serves a purpose like here in Jackson. I mean, what you're doing most certainly does, and it would in, I would say probably almost every market. We are in here in Jacksonville, we're a #1 Navy retirement city, 2 naval bases, a lot of military here. So I think the veterans angle was a good one here. So I'm always very curious. I was like we mentioned before the show, I was a history major and a teacher and a coach before getting into real estate. And when I hear about people doing, so those are very like, passion filled pursuits. It was difficult for me to leave that on that level. I knew I needed to do a little more for my family, and I've always had an entrepreneurial bent to me. But when I hear about you and others kind of marrying the two concepts up and being able to have like, that intrinsic benefit in addition to something, that generates wealth and gives you time freedom and family freedom. I really like that.
Nice
Well,
comment.
I'm sorry, Maria. And I was going to say, if where do you want to take this? Because part of where we sometimes go in these talks is like, goals. And so I feel like one goal must feel like you've already done it. Like you did kind of a novel thing and you pulled it off. And it sounds like you pulled it off perhaps
And the
more than
goal
once.
is to have this across the entire nation. We need these communities everywhere. I have parents call me constantly. When are you going to build one in Texas? When are you going to build one in California? Are you coming to New York? The demand is huge. And so, I've already reached out to some people in some other areas to go there next. We've got some people in Utah that are looking to do this, and people in Hawaii. I mean, there's people who want to do this all over. So once we get a good proof of concept going a couple times, we want to kind of package that up. Not a franchise, if you will, but just something that someone can replicate.
Yeah, that's amazing. So typically, and I know I kind of asked this before, but I'm just a little more clarification. So like say you do your Utah project or whatever's next, would you expect most of your LPs to be parents or guardians, or am I off on that?
No, I think that can be a really great strategy for folks because I mean, depending on how much you invest, you could make sure that it it covers their cost of living there forever or wherever they choose to live, because obviously you could spend the money anywhere you want. But I think it's a good plan for anybody, a parent or a grandparent that just wants to make sure their kids are going to be okay when they leave this world, right? Or just for themselves. Like a lot of people do the 1031 exchanges in LP investments, and every 5-7 years you're going to have to find a new place. Someone's going to be wanting to take a tick into a large complex, tenant and comment for those listeners who may not know what that is. That can be a pain in the butt after a while. Like here you can just park it and forget it, and you're still going to get your capital back, so you can still go invest that somewhere else if you wanted to keep rolling with that. But if you just want to make sure you just have that constant income coming in, that's pretty awesome.
I guess just to rephrase it in just very, very plain English. I mean, if I had an autistic child, I could invest enough in one of these communities to where I know my preferred return is sufficient to cover their rent
There you go.
into perpetuity. And at the same time, we're amortizing debt. We have the tax benefits and we're gaining wealth because certainly over time that asset is appreciating. Wow. That's cool, Maria. Very cool. So it's just not many people that are doing something actually. I don't want to disparage anyone else, but it's like there's something to be said for like not being too inventive as an entrepreneur, because you got, sometimes you just get slaughtered. But it's like I love to see somebody doing something like this is kind of novel. You're marrying something like tried and true and established and like one of the most fundamentally sound asset classes, with this cause and this need and this passion, and you're marrying in like kind of different dynamic funding and nonprofits. So hats off to you. It's really cool.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, I don't know if I didn't prep you for this, but sometimes we'll do like a deal breakdown. If my guest is not an investor, I kind of steer away. And if you don't like this, I'll ask Sam to edit it out. But if you do, we'll rock and roll. We call it the Coach Brown breakdown. So it'd be just a sample deal. And what we usually ask is, how did you find it, fund it, fix it, and exit? I know you're not so much of an exit girl, but maybe you have exited in the past. But finding it, funding it, what'd you do to it, and then an exit if there is one. So if you don't want to run through one, that's fine, but I'm going to give you the opportunity if you do.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's a particularly interesting one. Well, something that might help your listeners would be my first multifamily, because people always say, getting in is the absolute hardest part. So we could maybe tackle that one. I won't say it was a home run,
That's
but it
okay.
did get me going, right? So once we figured out we wanted to get into multifamily, everyone said you got to get to know the brokers, right? So started networking, attending all the meetings, all the conferences, all those kind of stuff. And what we figured out pretty quick is that the the really big brokers that have been doing this a long time, they kind of have their niche clients that they're going back to, and it's really hard to get in there. So what we started looking for were the newer brokers. Still with the bigger firms, it can be your Marcus and Millichap or something like that, but newer brokers that didn't already have an established client list. And then show them that you've closed on other things, even if it was single family. And if you could show them you have businesses, hey, look, we got a business mind, we're running these things, we execute on what we say we're going to do. Like, you got to sell them on that, because you can't show them this proven track record of multifamily and then show them your accounts, show them you got the cash to close, right? And so that was kind of the strategy there. So we found a new broker, and he helped us find some stuff. And this was right when real estate was really starting to, or in Florida in particular, the market was getting hot. So everybody's coming in with, hard money down first day, 30 days to close, crazy stuff. So we also knew we needed to be able to do that. So we built a good relationship with a local bank, because they are way more flexible. And when you tell them you're on a time crunch to do something, they can usually do it. So they had everything prepared in advance, so we can make a really good offer. And so we found a property that we liked, and we knew that the most important thing for us was not the price. It was establishing our credibility in the multifamily world. So we had to get this property. Of course, you don't want to overpay to the point that you're not cash flowing. So cash flow is always a priority. But basically, we knew what everybody else was offered, and we said, let's just go in hot, more than what they're offering, and make a contingent on a 24-hour acceptance, and really fast close. And so that's what we did. And it wasn't the best, most beautiful property. It was a 12 unit, wasn't anything super exciting. It's done okay, not great, not bad, just kind of middle of the road. Still way better than any of my single family did. But it got us that establishment. So now when we went to buy the next one, we could show that track record. Hey, we've already done this. We closed. We said we were going to close in this quick time frame. We did that. There's no retrading, none of that business. So, not super exciting. We didn't go make $10 million in 10 days or something like that, but it was just sort of something that might help your listeners when it comes to getting your foot in with the brokerages and starting to establish that credibility, because the first one's the hardest.
I agree. And there's that concept of the law of the first deal. We've talked about it before, but it might have been a few episodes. But, I obviously host this podcast for a reason. I think these conversations, this education is important. I think this is a message more people need to hear. And if I can help that, then I'm doing my job. I think that at a point, you don't stop listening to things like this, but you must go out into your market. You must go out and do, the strongest word in the English language, 2 letters, DO, go do. And you have to, because like your 12 unit deal. No, you don't make $10 million on 12 units, at least not any markets I know of, but you found the deal. I mean, the first deal that I did, I'm not embarrassed of it. It was the first thing I ever did. It was like a $38,000 little like purple house, like, I knew the lot was worth around that. And I'm not a contractor, but, I went through, I'm like, we can fix this thing up. And I thought it was, 150, 160 on the exit, maybe a $40,000 rehab. I'm like, let's go. And it took longer, and it cost more than 40 to fix it. But, we made I think 55 grand, and I did it pretty much alone, and I 1031 into an 8-unit apartment.
There you
Now
go.
I'm a landlord. 4 of those tenants were vouchers. Now I'm learning about vouchers. Now I'm coordinating vendors. Now I'm working with the housing authority. And then we got out of that one, moved into 28, 83. And people meet you on your journey and they're like, oh, you've got over 100 units and this much passive income and podcast host or whatever. It doesn't start that way. Like don't compare time now with your time, or my time now with your time now. It's like they're different timelines. You got to give yourself some room.
Yep.
7 years ago you wouldn't be impressed. So anyways, just having some perspective.
Yeah. No, and then you get to learn all those things you think you learned because you listened to the podcast, you read the books, you took the courses. But until you do it, oh man, property management is hard. Even when you have a property manager, like you got to manage that property manager. We screwed that up really big on that one. Like had to fire him, get out of a messy contract, get a new property manager. Like now I know how to screw in a property manager, and I learned that there. And I think it's very important to go if you're looking to become a syndicator, for example, go do it on your own a couple times first. Do not take a chance with other people's money until you've been through the school of hard knocks. So screw it
I
up with
agree.
your own money. I'm okay with losing my money. I don't like losing my own money, but we just call that tuition, right? For learning. And then, so pay tuition with your own money before you're paying it with other people's money. So go make the mistakes because you're going to make the mistakes. I'm still making mistakes. I'm just
That was
not at that
awesome,
point,
Maria.
you know.
Sam, we might need to clip that for the social media clip. That was awesome. I like that. Your tuition. I paid some tuition. I
We've
paid
all
some
paid
tuition,
tuition.
Maria. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, anyways, okay, I could go down that rabbit hole. I'm going to stop. Okay. So it sounds like the last thing I usually ask on these sample deals is lessons. It sounds like, kind of that law of the first deal, getting a track record, paying your own tuition. And now it doesn't sound like you lost money on it, but I know what you mean. I don't think I would. We did a syndication. It was not for multifamily. It was for a big industrial site. We closed 2 months ago. And
Congratulations.
thank you. We raised $1 million in private equity, retail lenders, not family office or anything. And it was a little challenging because it was a deal that didn't cash flow. It's an accrual deal with a big pop. Great deal though. But what I'm getting at is like I can't imagine going to even the Wise Carlton Sheets or someone else. I can't imagine like walking out of a seminar and being like, I'm gonna go syndicate. I just think it's reckless. I do agree with you. I think you need to bite off something that you can bite off. You may need to partner in the beginning, but just I would be very careful. Because I think one thing people don't talk about a lot, if you really get wiped out in your first deal, some people rebound, they pop on shows like this, they're on Bigger Pockets, they're like, stars that rise from the ashes. But for like a regular person, if you get wiped out early, like that might be it. You might just be like, like, I'm gonna go be a school teacher. I'm gonna go do something else. Like
Yeah.
it's just too much. So I think that law of the first deal, doing it right, making a huge profit is much less important than not losing money and gaining lessons. Like that's really what matters. All right, Maria, we're going to do a couple, I call it the call to play section. So we're just going to run through some resources that you like for the audience. And it gives us a little texture on you a little bit. So first one is real estate or personal development books. What are some of your favorite real estate books or personal development books?
I really like Vivid Vision. Now maybe that's because that's sort of my thing is seeing something that's needed and going after it. But Vivid Vision, Cameron,
Herold.
thank you. Yes.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
no.
familiar with it. I actually haven't read it, but it's on my list.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, read that, read that. So it really helps you get a very clear vision of where you go because you may have a vague idea, but really knowing where you're going because then you can say yes to everything that brings you down that path and no to everything that distracts you. So kind of the one thing too is along that same path, right? You got to have the one thing and you just say yes to everything that brings you there and no to everything else because there's a lot of shiny objects out there. It's really easy to get distracted. So I really like that.
That's why I like these questions because I already kind of knew this from our conversation, but by you answering with vivid vision and the one thing, I know you have focus. And even if you don't naturally have focus, if those are the books you like, by God, you're getting yourself focused. So
Yeah.
that's part of why I like these little roundup conversations. Um, What do you do for fun when you're not solving the housing problems of the autistic community, soon to be across America? What are you out there doing for fun?
I go do the things I used to get paid to do. I volunteer to go do wildlife work. So I'm still
Oh,
up there climbing trees and, slinging a torch on a fire. If they'll have me on the prescribed burns, go tackle a wildfire with somebody, work on wildlife stuff. I'm still the president of the Florida chapter of the Wildlife Society. So still involved in that. Just can't get that out of me.
so we won't see any of your new communities being built in wetlands.
No, probably not. Yeah, I'm very much into the reuse kind of thing. That's, we talked off show a little bit about the hotel conversions. I like the idea of converting something and giving it new life, right? And there's a lot of
Yeah,
empty office buildings and things that can be converted and reused. And so we're looking for lands that can be done that way as well.
yeah. No, I think that like a clever change of highest and best use or adaptive reuse. I think those are talk about using like creativity, like an artistic vision plus real estate. Some of the
Exactly.
coolest projects. All right. Your best advice for those eager yield coach audience members.
Do not go at it alone. Don't play the lone wolf. As much as I love wolves, don't play the lone wolf. They do better in teams. Got to have that pack to support you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that you threw in as much as I love wolves. Yeah, I'm getting such a clearer vision of you, Maria. All right. The Viking coming out of you too, and the biologist.
That's
Awesome.
right. Can't row that Viking boat alone either.
So, look at that. You're just being selfish. You're
I'm
dropping all
just
the
being
nuggets. I
silly.
got nothing to say to that. It's just cool. You can't row that Viking boat alone. All right, Maria, this has been fun. Where can people connect with you, learn more, find you?
BlueVikingsCapital.com. There's links there to Valhalla. There's links to all my social media, my email address, my phone number. Hit me up.
And you should, guys. You should hit her up. This has been a lot of fun. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this show. We tackled some unique things, in particular, the topic of autism and real estate and investment in apartments. So I don't know that we'll ever do that again. So share this episode with a friend if you think it would be impactful or the topic would resonate. As always, follow, rate, review helps us get, a little higher in the algorithm and better content along the way. If you're into the socials, check us out at Yield Coach on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We frequently post deal opportunities, bonus content, and inside looks into our personal and professional pursuits. But for now, guys, that is a wrap on this show with Maria. It's been fun. I'm your coach, Ian Brown, signing off and reminding everyone to lace up and leave it all on the field. Yield Coach out.